Hello, Ryan here, aka Mac, and welcome. Today I would like to go through the most recent PU monthly report and break it down so you get the information you need. As always, a huge thank you to all of my patrons and channel members who make these videos possible, in particular to my latest patron, Foible. Thank you so much for the support. If you do want to support the channel further, guys, all the links are in the description below. So this month's report combines November and December's work, and my techie friend has also explained a lot of what the technical jargon means for many sections, so a big thank you to him, and let's get to it. For general AI, the team began by exposing support for character traits in the skills and traits editor, which allows them to configure character traits that influence the skill calculation of the behavior selection. They also added the ability to propagate tactical requirement tags into the TPS queries. So it's great to hear progress is being made on the traits and skills for AI, as this all determines the NPC character's overall abilities, and when hiring them, letting you know their strengths and weaknesses. A subsumption node for tactics selection was implemented, which will be used to build combat tactics as subsumption functions and simulate the selection like subactivities. They say this is a big improvement as the team don't have to switch subactivities, so the characters can maintain the context of what they're trying to do. So basically this means an NPC can do a subactivity outside of its daily tasks while still knowing what its daily tasks are, instead of having to switch to a subactivity and then completely forgetting what its daily task routine is. More info was added to the range event dispatcher component debugging, that's a mouthful, which allows the team to better debug events related to perception, distance, and direction, thanks to more information on screen. And they also introduced a range event receiver mission variable into the range event dispatcher. So basically just allowing the devs to see and track that all of the AI are moving and spawning correctly. Now the AI team also improved nav mesh regeneration requests on the physics grid where a sub-platform spawned. This will fix inconsistencies in the nav mesh caused by the physics system not notifying the mesh when object containers are spawned, making for simpler regeneration requests for the whole bounding box. Now this is to help update the areas that need updating so the AI know the state of the area that it's spawning into. For example, it should improve the system and make certain issues like NPCs standing on chairs happen less. Now it's not the fix for that, but it should help alleviate the issue somewhat. Support for hierarchical structures in the Subsumption master graph was added, alongside the possibility for functions to be applied to different states. This makes it much easier to set up the master graph and also extends the basic functionalities to better describe when states can be selected. So this work is mostly used for AI logic, logical triggers, and something scripted by a developer. The team also did a lot of optimizations, cleanup, and bug fixing for 3.12's release. So onto character combat AI, one of the team's main focuses was continuing the development of enemy dodge to allow combatants to turn their body direction to the target during dodge actions. They also introduced hearing filter areas where NPC audio perception is limited by stimuli in the environment. These locations will help the designers improve scenarios and define action bubbles in their missions, and a new procedural clip was added to control active fire modes on weapons while playing specific animations. They also introduced several improvements and adjustments specifically for human AI combat behaviors, for example the use of new tactics selection tech, which will ultimately help the team to iterate faster on new tactics. And bug-wise, an issue was fixed preventing NPCs from returning to their previous activities when targets were eliminated and no other threats were around. So that's pretty cool. So they take down a target, realize that no more threats are around, and then they get back to the tasks they were doing before the attack, hopefully in a natural manner. Finally, they rectified issues that would cause NPCs to react slowly to perception events created by friendly NPCs already in combat. So the ship AI team introduced a new assignment to enable AI ships to use a designated spline to dock to the space station bay. This is the first pass on the full implementation of docking, which currently creates the required interface for the designers to control the request and allow NPCs to simulate the operation. Basically, another step to getting AI flying around the verse with their big ships, which will be a big contribution to the overall economy. They made progress on gas cloud flying awareness, and issues with AI ships performing a defend target assignment was solved. The management of quantum enforcement devices, or QEDs, were amended, and now all AI pilots flying QED equipped ships will enable and disable them correctly. They also fixed the quantum travel flow for AI, which allows AI ships with sufficient fuel to quantum travel to leave the situation. So some great improvements and fixes there, really expanding on the NPC's abilities to act accordingly to each situation, which will be vital to getting them moving around the verse independently. Finally, they added the fire discipline skill value to AI pilots to define when they want to use lasers or ballistic weapons, and also behaviors like aggressive, cowardly, reckless, resentful, and show-off were added to open pilots up to different maneuvers based on their skill levels. So it sounds like the AI are really shaping up now, giving them more character and personality while actually limiting the action to their skill level will really breathe some life into the NPCs. Moving on to social AI, they finished the first iteration of work giving NPCs the correct knowledge of how to use and pass through doors. NPCs can now trigger custom logic when traveling through specific navigation links associated with different usables. This includes waiting while passing through an opening or closing automatic door to give a more natural look, and a new door state subsumption variable can now expose the different values the door has for its opening state, so they can verify if a door requires manual opening as well. The facial animation team developed animations for several PU character sets. The body animators worked on exercise variants, including yoga and weightlifting, alongside vending machines and arcade games. Now, a lot of these I think are for Squadron 42 characters, just to give them more life, but obviously they will transition into the PU as well. For character art, the team worked on visuals for 3 sets of armors being planned for release later this year. I do wonder if any of these are these utility armors perhaps that they've been talking about. And the concept artists spent time visually exploring the Pyro system, stating that they've been turning out great ideas and are excited to get Pyro assets into the pipeline. Modelers and tech artists focused on Q1 and Q2 goals, including clothing for the refinery decks to help the characters feel more suited to the environment, and for Q2, the team worked towards a suite of civilian clothing for Orison, alongside minor creatures to help fill out the space. Now, I can't tell if they're being sarcastic in terms of minor creatures and are actually referring to space whales. I don't think so. I think it's more to do with smaller fauna moving around Orison, which could be things like birds or insects perhaps, but I don't know for sure. For the environment art team, they worked on the refineries and event-related mission content, including new variants of existing space-based points of interest with improved visuals and dynamism. I think this may be referring to the derelicts for the Xenothreat missions. Development continued with Orison, with the majority of platforms moved from Greybox into the final art phase. The layout, modularity, and flying experience for the habitation platforms were worked on, while surface wear and information decals were explored for the industrial platforms. I cannot wait to make Orison my new home. I'm very excited to see this place. So the planet team revisited several of Stanton's planets and moons to update them with the latest improvements, which will come to the rest of the locations in 3.13, and they also implemented best practices established during the ongoing work on Pyro for planets and organic assets. Now, they updated the planets and moons in 3.12, and they do look incredible, so I'm very excited to get exploring the rest of them in 3.13. So alongside all of this, a huge push went into fixing and closing out the backlog of bugs that led to a number of remaining legacy bugs to fall dramatically, which is music to my ears. The ship art team worked on a handful of ships, including the Aegis Javelin, which received visual effects, a side turret, and level of detail tweaks. The UK team began adding the final touches to the Crusader Hercules, completing the lighting throughout, with December seeing the bridge and engineering areas polished and handed over to the downstream teams. Man, I cannot wait to get flying that ship. Finally, the Aegis Gladius received exterior component bays, and the Redeemer entered the white box phase. It'll be a great day when all of the ships have their physical components and we can fully interact with them, replace them, repair them, and they all interact with each other. I'm very much looking forward to that day. For the weapon art team, the bulk of the artwork and rigging was finalized for the Cure Life medical gun, and a new breach charge asset was created. So firstly, this Cure Life medical gun I believe is to be the multi-tool of medicine for the next step of medicine, which will allow us to load various vials into it and inject them into ourselves or into others for healing and drug use, which will be a great step into the medical profession direction. But the breaching charge sounds pretty incredible. I do wonder now with physical damage if we will be able to breach a ship from almost any section, so long as it does allow for direct access into the ship. It could just apply to doors, which is probably more likely, but I do still wonder nonetheless. Pre-production started on the Volt Parallax Electron Rifle, while the initial art pass for the crossbow was completed. An art pass on new weapon attachments was undertaken, including holographic sights and compensators. For ship weapons, a Sabot projectile for the Idris railgun was created, which visual effects are currently experimenting with. That sounds pretty cool. Is a Sabot an armor-piercing round? I'm not too sure, so do let me know in the comments. Also, work began on a Moab-style bomb, and some existing missile assets were polished as well. So things are really starting to shape up with these large guns and payloads. The Moab, or the mother of all bombs, is likely to be for the A2 Hercules, whenever that is scheduled to release. Weapon Art also spent time supporting active feature teams on Mounted Weapons, which is a fixed weapon platform capable of mounting various size 1 ship guns, and this will be great for defending points, and likely very useful for FPS combat. I do wonder though if they need this for theatres of war. It would be great to get an update on that. For audio, they looked into improving the general cockpit audio experience via ship computer feedback, and they also continued work on volatile cargo. Also, a new junior sound designer was tasked with improving the sounds of crashed and derelict ships for future release. The back-end and network team focused on persistent service optimization and stability, and were able to vastly increase the performance of the variable service, loadouts, and the main persistence cache service. Stability of the backend increased greatly, surpassing the performance and reliability of previous releases. Low-level networking code was updated to improve performance, scalability, and robustness, and several fixes and optimizations to the transaction service, rentals, and the entitlement processor were completed as well. And finally, they began internal testing on the Super Pcache iCache services that will be deployed this year, so some great work being done there. Now in engineering, the physics team worked on optimizations mostly. This included an improvement method for pre-physicalization for planet terrain patches, for use in collision checks, and improvements to event queuing. The first draft of propagating physicalized shockwaves was submitted, and box-shaped physics grids and bullet drag was also added, plus sign distance field support was improved, and work continued on soft body deformation. So the shockwave work is basically support for things like earthquakes, or for example a meteor impact where the ground will tremble and the body will react. That could be used for so many events, so I very much look forward to hearing what they do with it. Now the Vulkan API initiative continued with high-level render code refactor and optimizations. For example, the way material constants are uploaded to the GPU was simplified and optimized, and a new, larger refactor of the shader cache backend system began as well. Now my friend does mention it's good news to see the shader cache refactor, as it's still corrupting, and this should improve that and potentially reduce the download size slightly. For planetary atmosphere rendering, time was dedicated to volumetric cloud rendering. The initial draft was implemented, and work on volumetric cloud shadows made great progress, and work will commence with improvements to localized cloud shaping, and all of this work will ultimately lead to rendering of volumetric clouds at planetary scales. So excited to see clouds. The core engine team spread their efforts over a couple of areas. Firstly, a large number of bug fixes and improvements were completed, such as streaming meshes for animated viz areas, likely used for the extending of the Hull C tubes I expect, and the ability to add viz areas to CGA joints. Now I'm unsure what the CGA is. Also, they say using telemetry from the PU and PTU, the core engine team continued their ongoing investigation into memory usage. This led to the engine-wide memory allocator and tracking system to be substantially refactored and improved. Finally, to provide an additional performance boost to the servers, the Linux dedicated game server was switched to a monolithic executable to allow the compiler to generate better code, and a stress test for object container streaming was added. So this basically means that they are still looking for these memory issues, these memory leaks, and a stress test is to see performance issues with the server and container streaming where the memory issues are still coming from on the server. So they're really just trying to track that down. Now for gameplay features, they saw the introduction of the reputation system, and all the current gameplay features will continue to be converted to take further advantage of that new functionality. A new mobiGlas app for the reputation system was kicked off as well, internally known as the RepDex, which I do like, will allow for players to check their affinities and reputation with organizations and contacts, along with their notoriety. Players will also be able to track their career and progression within orgs and view descriptions, lore, key members and important information, and the notoriety section will allow players to monitor reputations and view all of their current active perks. Now I really love the sound of this. A deep look into your current status with all orgs, guilds and individuals in the verse will be a great way of tracking everything, so I cannot wait to see that come to the PU. Now the vehicle feature team spent November vastly improving the IFCS spline following, which will be used by AI ships, and also led to improvements in how the ships fly relative to each other. This is useful, they say, for features like formation flying and following behaviors. The missiles were converted to use the proprietary system of IFCS. That will give more reliability and tunable flight behaviors. The general docking flow was worked on too, which fixed collision issues in the flow, and they polished the overall experience. They added new features like auto dock and unified docking and landing for a more familiar experience, and also some of the underlying attachment tech was heavily iterated on to improve the reliability and help the team better deal with persistence. Now, ship-to-station docking, when implemented, will require players to request permission from the air traffic controller before the dock will even extend. However, various areas of docking still needs focus, such as configuring docked ships like the Merlin and Constellation via the Vehicle Manager app. And finally, the team progressed with the Aegis HUD visuals, continuing to implement elements and explore new features for both visuals and functionality. Docking will look incredible. Just seeing these large ships approach and then dock, and then watching all the crew make their way down the collar will be quite a momentous moment in Star Citizen. Now, the graphics team focused on improving stability and fixing bugs for 3.12, including solving a visual dither pattern when the sun was obscured by a cloud. They also fixed issues causing gas clouds and particles to clip inside spaceships by improving the volumetric and particle culling system. Plus several other bugs, including popping shadows and overbright camera exposure when a planet streamed in, were fixed as well. Now, the lighting team spent a lot of time working on 3.12 locations and are currently converting older locations to the new runtime cube map system to free up disk space and improve the accuracy of reflections and ambient light. The narrative team worked through requests from upstream teams for the next 2 quarters and discussed in-game mission events currently in development. They progressed with Orison and began looking forward to other star systems, which led to the creation of a significant number of location documents, which include the details of Pyro's inhabitants, its flora and fauna, and the team are currently thinking about points of interest in the Nyx system to get ahead of schedule. Narrative also met with the actor feature team to create a lore explanation for the respawning mechanic, which was discussed in the Death of a Spaceman Calling All Devs episode. Now, the props team did some work with the social AI on wall panels, creating a template geometry for the wall panel itself and a component and subcomponent that work with new performance capture. Also, a small amount of rework on the shared component interiors was required due to these changes. Props also worked on the cooperative locomotion system, specifically trolley push and pull, and over the next few months they will retrofit the existing library of trolleys to this new setup. So all of those trolleys that you see dotted around, especially in the cargo decks, will be interactable, and we will eventually be able to place items on them and then push them around. Great for engineering when you're moving components around your ship, for example. Now, the tech animation team prepared for a large update to the facial rigs, consisting of a ground-up overhaul of all face assets to enable several long-term initiatives to unite early this year. The Turbulent Web Platform team advanced on the recent architecture enhancements. They also improved the error reporting pipeline and upgraded Sentry and Panic to improve searchability and performance. For UI, the team's major initiative was creating a system to allow game animation systems to trigger changes in the UI, which paves the way for NPCs and animated events to interact with UI. And they also improved tech for displaying text that will be used for notifications and mission objectives. Finally, they spent time sorting bugs and the player experience issues and converted older systems to building blocks to make them easier to maintain. Now, for visual effects, they added the finishing touches to the recent signed distance field shield impact effects, which can be seen on the Idris and then will be rolled out to all of the other ships soon. And new vehicle weapon effects were finalized with focus on readability to improve the player experience during combat. So that is the monthly report. What an incredible amount of work being done. In particular, it's exciting to hear all of the progress they are making on the AI and how in-depth they are going to be to create characters, to have more character to them. It is very exciting to hear the work there. It also sounds like Orison is coming along well, and all of the work that they're doing on these new systems like Pyro and Nyx is very exciting to hear. Hopefully we get some footage of those systems soon. But that brings us to the end of the video. I do hope you enjoyed my breakdown of the PU monthly report for November and December. And if you did, be sure to hit that subscribe button for more Star Citizen content and tick that notification bell if you want to be notified when my videos go live. Also, if you could do me a really big favor and hit that thumbs up, it really helps the channel out. And if you want to talk more about Star Citizen, be sure to follow me over on twitch.tv/supermacbrothers. A big thank you again to my patrons and channel members who make these videos possible. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.